谢谢。那因为今天我们这个 panel 呢，主要有2位国外的贵宾，所以我们这个 panel 主要就是用英文来进行。Because we have 2 distinguished panelists and also Sherry Zhang from Taiwan government. So I would like to run this panel in English. I think that will be fine for everyone. And then we also have a simultaneously translation. My name is Nivan Huang. I'm very pleased to be invited by Sophia and CK for Kasei Financial Holdings' 10th years climate summit. I get involved in climate change in 1997. This year is my 30th year in climate change advocacy. Then I have been invited to participate the first summit of Kasei Financial Holding 10 years ago. So this year is also very critical for me, and it's quite meaningful. So I'm very pleased to moderate this panel. As you already know quite well, the current situation of the climate change, we have already touched upon periodically the 1.5 degrees centigrade warmer comparing to the average temperature in 1880. That means adaptation become very, very important for all of us. Then we have already witnessed that the extreme weather event now is going on in Europe. You can see the air conditioning, electrical fan become, the hot sales product in Europe. So it is an incredible current situation that we have to all face the reality of the climate change. And we also witnessed 5 years ago the COVID-19. So if we have a more and more serious situation of biodiversity loss, and then the next, the unexpected but infectious disease to attack the whole world, then we might face another very dilemma situation is there might be possible no vaccine, because a lot of vaccine should depend on the biodiversity. So the climate change will also cause a big threat to all of the biodiversity. So now we are facing something like an interconnected situation. But unfortunately, we have a geopolitical conflicts. Then we have some other political leaders in the whole world. Now they are reluctant to take much more proactive climate action. So something like if we are looking the next 3 decades of development up to 2050, then whether we do have a very big opportunity to achieve net zero. So we gotta do a lot of planning how we can take the challenges and how we can walk the talk, just like Professor has already mentioned. But here in Taiwan, I would say that we have a very lucky, because our financial authority, they are much more proactive in providing the policy framework. So I think in this panel, we will run this panel in 3 rounds to ask the different key questions to our distinguished panelists. And then we hope that we will have a very inspiring, interactive panel discussion for today's key topics. Then I would like to raise my first question to every one of the panelists. The first round will focus on the new risk landscape in Asia about sustainable finance. The first question I would like to go to Rebecca. Rebecca is my colleague. A couple years ago, we were together in ASRIA, Association of Sustainable Responsible Investment in Asia. That is a Hong Kong-based Association. I think that you have already highlighted, based on some survey, the current investor attitude, and then also the current situation based on your survey, a very inspiring information. And from your perspective of Asian investor organization focused on climate change, what is the current the climate transition risk evolving here today? And then what does it mean? What is the major the business implication to Asia? And our investor priorities begin to shift based on what is going on right now in the whole world landscape, but come to the Asia landscape. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Niven, and so lovely to be here with you again and see you again. I've been working with you for a long time now. So I think overall the signals are clear. The market level signals, the targets that individual sort of countries and markets have put in place in terms of their climate goals, they're there. And we're starting to see regulation and policy come through to support that. But it needs to happen faster, and we need more detail. You've talked about whether it's the heat waves in Europe this week or drought in Taiwan, different weather impacts that we're seeing all around the world, but particularly in this region, which is so affected. But I think for investors, transition risk to them is policy risk. And so the biggest barrier that investors have to putting the very large amounts of money and capital that they do have is lack of clear and consistent policy signals. So that's the number one thing that they're looking for across markets. So what is that 2050 target, the overall target? How ambitious is that? Is it sufficiently ambitious to get that economy to net zero? And then when you backcast from that, what are the underlying policy signals? So the 2035 target is the most recent one that many countries submitted last year. And so that's great, but are they ambitious enough? Is that 2035 target going to get us on track to 2050? And then investors are looking for the sector level plans. So how is the carbon budget going to be allocated across the whole economy, across the different sectors? And they need this detail of the sector plans to break down that carbon budget so they can decide where they put their money to work. And then they take that bottom-up perspective where they engage with their companies and saying, well, which sector are you in? What does that sector pathway look like for you? What does your company transition look like compared to the whole of economy sectoral transition? How does your company fit in? Are you going to be successful for the short, medium and long term with the climate impacts that are impacting your particular company, your assets, your supply chains, your energy sources? How are they going to be affected by floods, heat today, this week? This is not a future problem, we know that now. So investors are trying to see that bottom-up company-level impacts of climate today, but matching it back to those longer-term signals. And so investors are asking for company-level detail. They need to see that policy-level detail too. And that's what's not quite there yet. We have to get more of those signals so that we know, so that the really big companies can, how their transition to 2050 is looking. But we also need to scale up the solutions. So I mentioned the progress investors are making. They're investing more in climate solutions. They're getting good returns. So this is all good news. But it's not happening fast enough, and it's not happening with big enough amounts of money. Investors have, our members represent, I think, $35 trillion US, but only a portion of that is going towards this transition directly. So there's no shortage of capital, but it's about how do we get that capital moving through the economies faster. Investors want to deploy that, but they have to have confidence in those policy signals that they're putting their money in, particularly these long-term asset owners that think in terms of multi-decades for the pensions in 50 years' time. They need to have the confidence that those policy signals and where their money is going to be able to get those sustainable returns. So I think that's sort of one of the biggest barriers that'll help unlock if we can get more detailed granularity in the sort of the market policy signals and regulatory settings. And investors want to work with governments to help design them so that the capital can then flow.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think because of the global leaders, some of them has been already stepped back, and then we are afraid of a lot of Asian political leaders might also follow that. So the policy risk will become, has a very huge impact to the financial sector, to the sector leaders. And then you also mentioned about that we do have a very good climate-friendly solution, but how to scale up the deployment rate of those kind of very promising technology for climate tech, and then it's just too slow to scale up. So we're going to speed up, and then we need more key stakeholders to collaborate together.
I'll just say only one country's gone out of the Paris Agreement. Everybody else is still in. So let's not get too caught up with the headlines. I know there are big implications, but what gives me hope is when I talk to the asset owners, the pension funds, the sovereign funds, they have the long-term time horizons. Honestly, they say this is a Trump bump. Like, this is a short term, not to say that it's not very disruptive, but it's relatively short term for them. Exactly. They are looking much longer term than this, and they have to manage all of these types of crises and risks. So this is a relatively short term risk for them, but I understand the media and the daily things that come out can be very distracting, but I encourage everyone to look past the headlines, focus on what asset owners are doing, because that's where the direction of travel is.
Yeah, that's a really good point, short term and long term. Otherwise, if we misjudgment the current situation, that will completely a nightmare. Then I would like to come to our vice chairperson of Taiwanese Financial Supervisory Commission. As I have already emphasized, that we are very lucky to have a very proactive financial authority. So now our policy framework has already moved from green finance to sustainable finance, and now prioritize transition finance and also nature-related issues into the mandatory regulatory for the listed company that need to be much more transparent in information disclosure. So could you please share with us what are the major key drivers for pushing our financial authority can lead us in building up gradually a better, it can be also much more leading policy framework in Asia?
Thank you, moderator, for your nice word to financial authorities. I think the evaluation reflects a very important shift in sustainable finance. In the past, sustainable finance was often understood mainly as green finance, supporting renewable energy, green buildings, or activities which are in line with environmental objects. But today, the risks are broader, more connected, and systemical. I will highlight 3 key drivers behind the expansion from green finance to transition finance and nature-related finance. Firstly, climate and nature are no longer separate issues, as Rebecca mentioned in her speech. They are the 2 sides of a coin. The international community increasingly recognizes that climate change and the natural losses are deeply interconnected. We cannot solve climate, and we cannot solve the climate crisis without protecting nature. We cannot protect nature without addressing climate change. Natural ecosystem, forests, oceans, wetland, soils, and mangroves absorb carbon and protect community from extreme weather. They are not only environmental assets, they are essential infrastructure for the resilience. Second driver, green finance alone is not enough to achieve net zero. Many Asian countries still rely on carbon-intensive industry, such as steel, cement, transportation, power generation, and the manufacturing supply chain. These sectors may not be green today, but they are essential to the economy and urgently need capital to transform. This is why transition finance is so important. The focus is shifting from simply asking whether an activity is green to asking whether a company has credible and measurable transition pathway. For Taiwan, this is especially important because we are deeply integrated into global technology and the manufacturing supply chains. Supporting orderly transition is therefore not only an environmental issue, it is about industrial competitiveness and the economic resilience. Third, natural loss is becoming a financial risk. Nature used to be seen mainly as a conservation issue, but now it is increasingly understood as a financial and economic issue. More than half of global GDP depends directly and indirectly on ecosystem services. When biodiversity declines, water resources become unstable, or ecosystems lose their ability to absorb shocks. Business and the financial institutions are also affected. For financial institutions, nature is no longer outside their balance sheet. It is increasingly relevant to risk management, capital allocation, and credit quality, long-term investment decision. So to summarize, the evolution is driven by three forces. Climate and nature is interconnected. Net zero requires financing a real economy transition, and natural loss is becoming material financial risk. For regulator, our role is to help the market move in the right direction by providing clear role framework, strengthening disclosure, improving data, and guiding capital toward activities that support both transition and resilience. Sustainable finance is no longer only about what is green today. It is about focusing a more resilient, low carbon, and nature positive economy for tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I think based on this morning's previous section by some keynote speakers already highlight the fact that Taiwan is small, but Taiwan is really big in terms of a lot of economic data. But we are a small island. We don't have a fossil fuel. We don't have enough key material. So we got to continue to improve the resource productivity. So you have already highlighted, no matter in some other Asian country, but I think in Taiwan, in the past few decades, then we also quite strongly dependent on fossil fuel. And now, based on the Middle East conflicts, the geopolitical problem, then we can see the too more dependence on the fossil fuel and much, much less resilience. So we got to continue to improve to reduce the carbon emission and try to build up more circularity that will become Taiwanese another new era's competitive advantage for moving forward. Thank you very much. Focus on the driver behind our much more proactive policy framework. Then I would like to come back to Professor Kosaka. We are not very familiar with you. Appreciate Sophia to introduce you to all of us. But when you mentioned your father was born in Taiwan, everybody laughed because that means something, not just only for you, also for every one of us. So welcome home. Yeah, you already mentioned that the a lot of initiative happening in Japan. I was in Tokyo last week. I also met some of your friends in biodiversity, nature positive community in Japan. Japan business has been already get involved in those areas, biodiversity, nature positive. Could you please highlight based on those kind of development in Japan, maybe already for 20 years, 2 decades? Then what is the current situation? Do you think that the most pressing challenges in biodiversity, nature issue that all of the Asia need to face?
Okay. When I started at the CBD was 2006, and the first COP I joined was in Brazil, and it was the first decision that was taken about private sector is back in 2006, and it was a very small venue. When I think about it, it was relatively small. Now the number of private sector that are involved has increased a lot. The financial, we even had a finance day in 2020 back in Montreal. So in this last 2 decades, the interest of the business sectors has increased quite high. And also there has been concrete measures. So at the beginning, we talked that, it's not only about civil society and government talking, but we need to involve business because you're part of the problem, but you're also part of the solution, right? And I think we agreed in this Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It's a very long name, I'm sorry, because we initially planned to do this in Kunming, but because of the COVID, it moved to Montreal, so it's called Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. In the Target 15, we have a business-related target which says that we should, or the big business basically, and the international ones, including the financial institutions, should disclose in a very transparent manner. That's the monitoring indicators, so to speak, that we have to date. So we started in the beginning. We need to involve you as a business, finance and business sector, and then we are now at the stage that we have a very concrete target. The step forward, for example, in Kumamoto and others, I think would be, it's involving the mid to small size institutions as well. I think this is also a challenge in climate change as well. But I think the big ones have these equator initiatives and all the arrangements and things, and they also need to act in an accelerated manner. But what we're witnessing right now in Japan and the worldwide is quite interesting. For example, in Kumamoto, Taiwan is big in the semiconductors, and we have this all the business also invested in Kumamoto and other parts of Japan. And at the beginning, people used to say semiconductors, ICT, they're good for environment. You don't need resources, it's quite good. But people are now realizing you need water, and it's sometimes noisy, maybe, and you need areas, and also you need the community, basically. So people are starting to realize, ICT and all these big, gigantic AI-related companies, they also need to be aware of this environment. And now what is happening, for example, in Higo Bank, which is a regional bank in that area, they said, we're going to establish a fund and bring that money back to the mountain and river basin, basically, the upper stream, and they're going to do some kind of a conservation activities so that the waters can come down. And Kumamoto is also a very water-sensitive area because they're using underground water. So these are the topic that we have to be, I think, aware. So it's quite interesting. So honestly, at the beginning, the biodiversity discussion focused a lot on the supply chain, and we were dependent on international supply chains and so on. That's also important. We rely a lot on resources from Australia to other parts of the world, and wood we import from America, or also developing countries. But we're also witnessing some local to regional areas. And also banks are also playing a critical role there, banks or financial institutions. So there are several layers. I think we need to discipline, or I would even be arrogant to say we need to educate the investors that you guys need to be aware of these nature aspects or climate-related aspects. That's the upper layer. But also we are seeing changes in the regional level. That's, for example, in a water basin level, that, okay, waters are flowing into these areas, or we're using these grasslands to capture water. So we need to invest in these conservation areas. So blue carbon ecosystems, as you mentioned, mangroves and so on, these are all local issues, local and regional issues. So we need to involve these areas, not only the big ones, but the big ones also need to team up, or the government also need to team up with the regional ones. So I think that's the point that we're aiming for sustainability. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving the Japanese case. I think in Asia right now, not just only now, I think in the last couple of years, Asia has already become the global products manufacturing center. And now the AI value chain, Asia also play very important. We need high-tech semiconductor, we need cheap, but behind that, energy, water, biodiversity, local community. You know, I'm not sure whether you know that recently there was one Gallup, the public pools survey results has already highlighted that a lot of community in the United States, they do have some big plan for building the data center, but their people mentioned they prefer to live nearby the nuclear power plant and not to live nearby a data center. So the water, noise, and a lot of issues become a headache. So the social license to operate is already raised the attention by the general public, and nature issues, water material consumption that will become very, very important. We look forward to have a more attention on this area. I think within Asia, that is something like nobody can do it alone. We need to have a more collaboration among different kind of key stakeholders in the society, locally, regionally, and in Asia Pacific. Now I would like to come back to Sophia. Sophia has been already become a very, not just only the queen of investment, but also a pioneer in climate change and sustainability, a very, very important opinion leader from financial sectors. And based on your experience and what the great efforts have been already done by Cathay Financial Holdings, could you please share with us why resilience is so important for financial institutions corresponding to the current pressing regional, local challenges in energy, climate, nature, biodiversity, and even including social, etc.
Thank you. It's amazing witness the variety of topics since 10 years ago to today, from climate awareness. And then as a vice chairman and the other speakers said, that expand from climate to biodiversity, nature, and now even impact investing and people-centered solutions. So there is a trend that people care more about other things, not just other human beings, but also animals, everything, because without resilience, no one can sustain long. And I believe in early years, when we talk about ESG, we talk about the balance between governance, social, and environment. But over the past 5 years, we're seeing that the common belief is without a sustainable society and a sustainable environment, economic growth and company earnings cannot be sustainable. So Cathay Financial Holdings, we started our responsible investment journey in 2014, and we're so lucky that we met Rebecca at that time to learn about PI and everything. 2016, we were one of the 7 founding members of AIGCC, and since that, we start to participate in many global initiatives, including Climate Action 100+, Asia Utility Engagement Program, series valuing water engagement. We helped the designs, as we mentioned. Last year, we actually sponsored a series how research on how technology sector, especially AI data center, is affecting the water sustainability in the world. And after that, we work on biodiversity, farmland carbon credit, regenerative agriculture, and we also are one of the earliest in sponsoring the development of biodiversity credit. And that's how we met Rio earlier this year. And the reflection of what we have done in the past 10 years is that we believe corporate is so directly connected with climate and nature. And when they talk about not just climate, but also nature, we think about action. It should not just be decarbonization. It should also be participating, contributing what we can, cross-sector collaboration. And every day of our business, we think about how we are affecting nature, affecting society. And therefore, I'm so glad to see, as Rio mentioned, we now talk more about nature positive. And so we need cross-area collaboration among all the stakeholders. And then second point I'd like to highlight is about Taiwan, because Taiwan is very exposed to frequent and drastic natural disasters. We have typhoons, we have very unstable water resources, and we also need to care about a lot of import on food and crops and also energy. So we also have to care about food security and energy security. But at the meantime, we need to fulfill our leading position in global supply chain. So the climate change and impact on nature has already become an even more severe risk to cross-border business relationship. So I'd like to highlight that the resilience is so important, but today if we look at the global allocation of funding to these topics, according to Climate Policy Initiative reports, global climate finance already reached around $1.9 trillion, but 90% works on mitigation. So as the climate change trend already cannot be reversed, we need to put more resources into adaptation. And so today, as of now, Cathay Financial Holdings, including investment and loans, we have already allocated into low-carbon investment, infrastructure, water resource, and also financial inclusion. Altogether is almost $2 trillion Taiwan dollars. We are the first to join Climate Group RE100 initiative, and very proudly that we are the first global financial institution who also joined 24/7. Thank you, Sam, for making the promotion on this meaningful action in the world. And our bank, Cathay United Bank, also work on CTP to help to teach SME how they should be more aligned into this global movement. So sustainability is not just the right for large companies, especially in Taiwan. We have so many SMEs, they also need help. We also work on green land load, for example, because we have more than 200 office buildings. We offer renewable, we help the tenant, SME company to procure renewable energy. So what I try to say is we try to, when we learn something, we try to think about who else will be affected. Can we learn early? Can we promote early? Can we help early? If this is something we need to do in 3 years' time, why not do it today and make it special? Why not call people to action earlier than later?
Thank you very much. I think as you have already mentioned that more than 90% of Taiwan area will be significantly affected by 3 kinds of nature disaster. So we always struggling with a lot of those kind of impact because of the climate issues. But now, because climate has been already changed, so extreme weather event, and then also the reality is we don't have a water, we don't have energy, we don't have a key material, and then because we also very strongly dependent on the global supply chain. So no matter that it's a geopolitical conflicts or some other global risk, then every key risk always impose significantly impact to Taiwan. But in the past, we are very strong because we are a vulnerable area, but we are very capable to stand up, and then so resilience is quite okay. But more and more complicated issue, interrelated risk. So we got to build a much more better, strong capability for taking those kind of a challenges, especially now that our financial institution become bigger and bigger. Now we can become more and more important key role in Asian financial market and capital market. So I think this sooner or later will become even strategic or the bold issues. So we need to be ready for that new era for the financial sector to become very good enabling role to support Taiwanese resilience corresponding to a lot of pressing challenge. Now I'd like to move the second round. The second round will focus on bankable, investable project. Actually, we do have a lot of money, capital. We are not facing the shortage of capital, but we are facing the big gap of the capital we need for net zero, circular economy, etc., even for the biodiversity nature related investment and this moment. So we are facing a very big gap for the capital we need to achieve the promising sustainable future. But the problem is, if we look at the current situation, we must also face a lot of dilemma, including the policy framework. Rebecca, you mentioned investable framework. So we do have those kind of bottleneck. Could you please share with us, if we want to close the gap, no matter that is for the net zero investment, circularity investment, nature-related investment, as this morning, then I think CK has already mentioned that we need every year $4 trillion for net zero, but currently, Sophia just mentioned, we just only have a 1.3 trillion available now. So the big gap need to be filled. Otherwise, it's not possible to achieve sustainability. But what will be the bottleneck in Asia, you think, if we look at, we try to improve the situation, investable, bankable, then what is your idea? Please share with us.
So I talked already about the policy environment and that it's not, the environment isn't yet suitable for this investment to move at the scale required. So that's, and the sort of the roadmaps, the sector-specific roadmaps that really, so that investors can see how sort of the national level targets will translate down to sort of asset level. And I think as investors talk to companies that they engage with, in the Climate Action 100 Plus initiative, we have the three main goals of asking what climate governance looks like at a company level and how sort of that runs through an organisation from the top all the way down to different asset levels. What's the decarbonisation strategy or the business plan for that business to transition over time? The different short, medium, long-term targets. And so we've been asking, and then the third one is how companies are disclosing against that. So that's sort of the three big buckets of questions that investors are looking for. And we've been increasingly getting more granular in the questions. So in the last few years, we've been going further and looking at what is the capital allocation and the capital expenditure that big companies are putting towards these solutions. And the numbers are very low. And so this was when investors started seeing this, they're like, right, you've set these targets, you've set 2050 targets, 2035 targets, 2030 targets, but the money you're putting into achieving those targets doesn't match up. You're saying there's ambition there, but your implementation is putting your money where your mouth is a saying that we use a lot. So, there's not enough money, whether that's going into R&D of new technologies or transitioning different business models. So I think coming back to the policy signals, they're not sufficient. The companies aren't getting the right signals from government. Investors are trying to talk to companies about what they want at a really granular level, and talking about what they expect to see from the companies. But investors, have certain tools available to them. And as I mentioned before, investors can't diversify away from climate risk. You could become a net zero investor tomorrow if you wanted to, but that would just be on paper. It doesn't really mean much when the climate change is still happening around us. You're still going to be exposed, and particularly big asset owners and pension funds, they own, a small bit of all of the economy, particularly if it's your home market. So you can't escape climate change risk. So you have to engage, and you have to engage responsibly with these companies. So it's about getting those signals right and telling companies what investors need to keep their money in that company, to keep investing in that company for the future. If they have the confidence in the transition plans that the companies are providing, then investors will have confidence that, okay, we understand where you're trying to go, we understand how your company is trying to transition, we understand your challenges, and we want to work with you on addressing those challenges, but you need to show us progress. But at the end of the day, if the signals aren't there from the policymakers, then companies won't move fast enough. That's why investors have been asking globally for mandatory disclosure in their markets. It's not often that a group of stakeholders asks for more regulation. But investors have asked this for the companies, and now they're doing it themselves because voluntary disclosure didn't get the information investors needed to make those investment decisions. So they have to have that sort of mandatory environment. So that's starting to come in, but it's sort of taking too long. And disclosure is only one part. At the end of the day, it's about the actions that the companies are doing. So, we need to see stronger carbon pricing across markets. And we're starting to see the carbon border adjustment mechanism out of Europe starting to have flow-on effects to other markets as markets adjust to that so that their industries remain competitive and so that they're not going to be disadvantaged by selling their products into Europe with a sort of a higher carbon price on them. So that's kind of a market signal globally. But we need to unpack, and I think part of it is that the fossil fuel subsidies particularly are sending mixed signal to investors. So if you're subsidising fossil fuels and energy production on one side and you're trying to say, oh yes, please invest in renewable energy over here, that sends mixed signals to investors, and it's confusing, and it will only increase the cost of capital for low carbon or renewable energy projects. And so we have to remove those subsidies, and then the market will actually work out the most efficient mechanism, which is to move to lower carbon, more renewable energy. But it's removing those distortionary signals that will allow the companies to move faster, and then the investors can move beyond that. There's blended finance models as well, which is about kind of getting the smaller scale solutions up and running, nature and the physical risk and resilience, and we need to definitely increase that work. But back to the point, investors need investable markets, not investable products. You can do all the blending, you can put all these projects together, but they're not going to be big enough for the really big amounts of capital. So again, it's about that in creating those investable markets, and not to say that it's all about policy. It's not the only answer, but it all has to happen together. I think that's the point. It's all got to move together. It's not investors waiting for policy, companies waiting for policy. It's about everybody designing the system, and particularly including the nature piece, the social piece. And I think there's a really great opportunity there as there is this more awareness about these new issues of this being able to integrate. And I think we can learn the lessons from working on climate for many years and leapfrog and use the frameworks that we've used in climate and use them for nature. They've come through much faster. And so now it's about building it in and integrating it, not sort of pivoting to something else. It's all part of the same issue, but also the same solution.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think just like Professor Kasaka mentioned, that walk the talk, right? So now the business has already given a lot of promise about the walk the talk, no capital allocation on the practical action, especially the bold action that can drive the technology innovation, but also achieve the triple bottom line. So on the other hand, that you also mentioned in your slides that you have already emphasized that the 5-50-10 that is possible for investor. So investor is demanding a lot of practical project for investing, but sometimes a lot of bottleneck for the policy framework is not very friendly. So how we can work together to unlock some of the policy that we can create much more investment-friendly, investor-friendly circumstances for moving everything forward together. I think that is really important. Then I would like to come to the Vice Chair regarding to the perspective of policy and regulatory. What do you think, how to create a better investor or bankable, investable, friendly situation that can motivate and speed up and also to enhance the transition opportunity for the private sector, but also the financial institution to work together so we can achieve better consequence corresponding to different kind of challenges.
Okay, thank you. I think if we want to review how can we cooperate closely, we needed to review what's the root issue of that. Is there any kind of gap between investors and the investee? So I think actually the market is not short of capital. You can see ours, at least in Taiwan, you can see the stock transaction volume increasing every day. So, in fact, the key challenge is not capital, but confidence. What we are facing is a gap between available capital and the bankable transition project. This gap is often driven by uncertainty, unclear standards, insufficient data, and limited visibility on a credible transition pathway, especially for carbon-intensive sectors. So here comes the regulator side or perspective. From a regulatory perspective, our role is to reduce the uncertainty and build the trust. I will highlight the 3 areas we can work on. First, establishing a common language. Companies and financial institutions often assess transition differently. Tools such as Taiwan's sustainable taxonomy and suggested element for transition plans help both sides align their expectation. They help companies articulate a credible transition strategy and provide financial institutions with a more consistent basis for risk assessment and financing decisions. When both sides speak the same languages, more projects become financeable. Second, enhance credibility and verifiability. Financial markets do not respond ambition alone. They require evidence. This is why transition action must be measurable, practical, and accountable. So we encourage companies to submit quantifiable and externally review emission reduction plans and the transition project. Once it is approved, this plan provides a stronger and more objective foundation for financing decisions. This helps capital flow to projects with real impact and measurable progress, rather than just claims that are difficult to verify. Third, strengthening engagement between finance and the real economy. Transition finance cannot be built only through frameworks. It must be grounded in real industrial transformation. This is why FSC together with financial industry net zero platform, where the Cathay Financial Holding is one of the members. It facilitates a structured dialogue with high-emitting sectors. This year, we will organize 4 dedicated sessions with carbon-intensive industry, including sectors such as semiconductors, transportation, and other key transition areas. The purpose is not only discuss, it is to identify, incubate, and structural financing a ready transition project. Through this engagement, financial institutions better understand industrial needs, while companies learn how to design projects that meet financing requirements. This is how a project moves from concept to bankable pipeline. At the same time, we continue to refine policy tools, including expanding the taxonomy to cover more industries and the transition activities so that more sectors can connect to sustainable finance. Ultimately, transition finance is built on trust. When frameworks are clear, data is credible, and the engagement is active, capital will flow to the project. The real bottleneck is not funding. It is building confidence at scale. Thank you.
Yeah, I think a pretty clear message. I think the first one is common language. The second one is credibility, verifiable, assurable, auditable outcome. And the last one, I think very important, is the business cases. We're going to benefit everyone, especially benefit the return or benefit to the investor and financial institution. Now I will come back to Professor. You mentioned that the Japan's situation, the development, historical background back to 20 years ago on nature biodiversity. Then what are the current biggest barrier you have already experienced, and or based on your observation, the biggest barrier for scaling the nature and biodiversity finance, and then what kind of the most powerful financial instrument you have already think that will be very effective in Asia? Nature and biodiversity challenges are still missing. So what will be your feedback?
Thank you. So I think the challenge is, twofold. First, the size, as I think Rebecca has rightly pointed out. You would want a larger size. I'm from forestry science, so I always get this carbon question, like, we need this amount of forest for the carbon credit. And unfortunately, Taiwan, Japan is a little bit too small, while Australia, US is always their favorite. But as I put it in one of my slides, you want always the larger and things. The focus tends to be a little bit on the size. But I think we also need to go into the quality and the standard. And as we discussed, the biggest challenge here is how do we measure it? Reducing the uncertainty, we need the clarity. Evidence, I couldn't agree more. That's where I think the science can come in and say, okay, we come up with some kind of a measurable instruments and here and there. We have an Asian-specific challenge as well, because most of the standards, I would honestly say, are most Europe, US-led. So, for example, when they say forest, with a high nature value, they tend to think, okay, it's a pristine, untouched forest, while the artificial forests may have less evaluation. But I think that's where Australia, Japan, and Taiwan can maybe team up a little bit and say, if you do the forest management in longer term, even it's a human-made secondary nature, it could have a biodiversity positive impact. It may not be the nature forest that you would imagine in the US or maybe in other countries, part of the world. But I think that's so the size and the evidence would be the two things I think we need to think about. for 500 billion US is missing to reverse this trend. That's the figures we have at this Convention on Biological Diversity. So that's the challenge. But I think we can reverse the trend by having a very smart and innovative way. So, of course, we can reverse the trends by changing some of the subsidies, some of the investments, but we can also reduce the curve that we have. Did you learn Kuznets curve in maybe at the university? There's a professor from Taiwan National University. If you don't know that, you can ask him. But you know, it's if your economy grows, the burden grows as well, but it becomes less at a certain point. You can reduce that height by having more innovation or technology-friendly way. For example, the African continent are said to have bypassed the phone directly switching to no line to mobile phone. So they didn't use this cable line kind of phone. So that sort of reduce the resource intensity. Maybe, okay, cell phone uses rare metal and all that, but by having all kinds of these innovation, I'm very happy that there are many startups in the room and new companies coming in. So I think this amount, okay, 500 billion, that's a lot of money, but we can also think about innovation as well. Second point, if I may continue a little bit, you know, regulators are not your foes. They're your friends, or they're not always your friends, but they can actually accelerate the innovation. So we tend to think, okay, if we have more regulation, if we have more restriction, that's going to slow the economy. But what happened in the auto industry in Germany and in Japan, they had a limitation in the 80s that you have to clear this and that sort of had a modernization in the industry. So I think that could happen also in Taiwan, that regulations are not always bad, but also promotes certain innovations. For example, I mentioned these AI issues. Why do we have these data centers closer to the urban areas? Maybe Taiwan has a limitation in the lands, but there's other limitations that we use our, you know, I don't know what do you call it in Taiwan, but we have Suica, the card that you use to get into the transport, or you use your credit card all the time. And that has to happen within the milliseconds. So the data center cannot be very remote in the current technology. So I thought, at the beginning, I thought, why don't you have the data center in Okinawa or other areas that is easier maybe, and they don't have an earthquake there. But actually, these limitations and trade-offs, but I think that we need some kind of innovation, and regulations and all that kind of things can actually promote these kind of innovations. So I think that's something that we need to look at. Sorry for taking up time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then I would like to come to Sophia, because we always mention that the financial institution is not just only the money capital provider to a lot of the transition, innovation, or transformation. But now we also mentioned that the financial institution can become a very, very good partner, and we work together. You have the slogan, better together, right? So what does it mean in practical financial support to the business or industry for the future development?
Thank you. We learned the concept of partnership from engagement. When I studied, I learned the word engagement. I thought in Chinese it's like before marriage. So then I realized when we engage a corporate, that means we care about them, we share the insight, their problem is our problem, how we communicate and make sure they understand, then we become their knowledge, their power, and their action. So to me, financial institution is not just about money. We need to help them. We should also give them wisdom. We can help them with these actions. So if our borrowers and our investee companies, they have better capacity, their future is our future. So only if they are successful, our investment portfolio and loan book can be successful. So I found that very strange. This is an over-liquidity market. But very often, many good projects cannot find the money. First of all, many of them go to the wrong place. They are in early stage and they go to insurance for money. So the risk appetite, risk-reward expectation is so different. They need help. They need a translator help them to understand where am I and who you should meet. So capacity building, provide them transition finance, and how to boost the ecosystem that can show us where is the project. Because very often people ask us, where is the money? And then I'll ask them, where is a bankable, investable project? So if I dip deeper a little bit, our insurance, our asset management broker, and our bank, we try to look at the area where they need more help. And that's why we do a lot of projects. Besides engagement with large corporate, we also help SME to understand and help them to be more compliant to disclosure and to improve. And then we also offer quite a wide variety of transition finance. For example, if a company, they do improvement on their sustainability project, water usage, pollution, emissions, we we them incentive. Yeah, so a little bit of partnership that we can show them that we care. And lastly, we are one of the largest financial groups in Taiwan. Can we do something more? So we are very happy to be early in many initiatives. Last year, we were honored to sponsor AVPN, where Everett is here, the main lead on climate. He will share his insight with us in this afternoon. They have a very meaningful project called Accent. Many projects in Asia, when we do energy transition, who will be affected? Can we think about orderly and just transition, care about local community, skill sets, micro and SME, how we can make some project workable and bankable, and then how can we scale up? So we are so happy that we are the initial, one of the anchor funder for them. And this year, they already get more sponsors. So we are so happy that we can be the booster or the ecosystem provider. So we're very honored to do that. So I think to conclude is that this is our mission to build the ecosystem. And only if our borrower, investee company, or our stakeholder, they are successful, can our financial portfolio, our operation can be sustainable.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of the time, but I would like to ask my last question, but I would like to allow me to ask you just only to feedback 90 seconds for everyone, okay? And we know climate change is more and more pressing, but we know the climate change related to energy transformation, mobility transformation, building transformation, material transformation. Even now, we know AI development will also strongly related to climate issue, but nature and biodiversity. Very low awareness. The businesses still cannot find the relevance of why I have to get involved and where is the money for those kind of investment or project. So I would like to ask every panelist from the international regional investment group, and how about the follow-up and your core corresponding to the nature biodiversity and Japan situation. What is the next step? And then from the perspective of the policy and regulatory, how about the future demanding in nature biodiversity related disclosure? And then back to Cathay Financial Holding, you've done a pretty good job in the last couple of years. And then what will be the next? And 90 seconds. We don't want to make everyone too hungry, okay? So could I invite Rebecca, please?
I think for companies, I think the key is really to move towards integrated transition plans. So incorporating nature, climate, and social elements into the single resilient investment strategy. And so this helps ensure that climate solutions, renewable energy, critical minerals that needed to produce them, data centres, as we've heard about, don't create new nature risks or social instabilities. And so I think the companies that can get ahead and disclose and talk to investors about what their exposures are, then that will lead to better investment decisions and make it easier for investors. And then I would just say, collaborate with your investors, and then investors and policymakers and companies work together and increase that collaboration, because that will help us all move faster. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Professor.
So in Kumamoto, we're going to discuss the indicator, state of the nature, and possibly in fall this year, TNFD would take some certain decisions. So I think there are indicators and steps we're looking forward to. Keep your eyes open or ears perked up for what the scientific committees are also doing with the indicators and evidence in creating the common language, not only the regulators, but please listen to scientists as well. So that will be something that I look forward. And there are new, also promising technology coming up, like using your mobile phone and identifying certain species and looking at the impact of climate change and so on. So I would like to stay also positive about as an attitude, that we're not pessimistic, but we're getting there, but I think it's a bit of a way forward compared to climate change, but we're getting there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Vice Chair, please.
With regard to nature, from a regulatory perspective, I would like to highlight the 3 key priorities moving forward. First one, although a moderator saying no disclosure no more, but I still want to mention disclosure. Actually, we believe the gradual and the practical approach to a nature-related disclosure is very important. And the second priority for regulator is ensuring that this disclosure leads to better decision. And the third one is strengthening data and the analytical infrastructure. So, because nature finance is still evolving rapidly, new instruments and nature-based solutions are emerging, but many are still at the early stage. Therefore, our approach is not one-size-fits-all. We will learn from international experience while working closely with industry to develop a solution that fit local conditions. Just as climate has become a core financial consideration, nature will increasingly become embedded in risk management, capital allocation, and long-term financial resilience. And back to Ria mentioned, financial authority and the regulator are not the enemy, not the foe, but the friend. I will mention our chairperson always mentioned that financial supervision is more like driving a car. And brake is very essential for safety. But the purpose of a car is moving forward. So we need an accelerate. So we are not only to balance the safety and the development, but we want to advance development and the supervision together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sophia, please.
Thank you. I really like to echo when first I met Rebecca, talk about climate actions. We believe that climate and nature action is a project do by learning and learn by doing. And we are Cathay Financial Holdings. We spent 10 years building this platform called for cross-sector collaboration. And I really believe Asia can do a lot more, and we can do a lot more together. So as our logo, we can see we do together, and I believe we'll be better together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we really appreciate a very good insight from distinguished panelists. Now, everybody, I believe that every day we watch the FIFA, right? The football global competition. We always say one ball, two sides, but you can see now football become very colorful. So many sides, yeah? So back to the climate and nature biodiversity issues. It's a really a tough challenges for every one of us. I have been in this area for 30 years. I believe that every one of us have already devoted ourselves working on this area for quite a long time. But the fact is the global situation is still getting worse. even we have already a lot of achievement, a lot of transformation has been already done, but that is a long journey. Now we have a more problem, nature biodiversity issue, and then inequality and social issue. So I think we are not enemy to each other. We are not something like the buyer and the supplier, not just only like the capital provider and you are a borrower. We are all part of the problems. We have to be all of part of the solution. So we need to work together very closely for our future, for our coming generation, for our money, for our profitability, for our country's competitive advantage. Remember one thing, when we want to pass over the accountability, responsibility to the next generation, you never say, yeah, we have been already so wonderful, so you can a little bit lazy. No, we always need generation by generation to work better, to contribute more, to become better. Then we are going to face a brighter future. Otherwise, when we're getting old, that will become a nightmare, right? Cheers up. Thank you very much for your attention and listening.